Thank you for tuning into Literary Blend, a publishing podcast. I'm your host, Demi Michelle Schwartz. There's no perfect recipe for chasing a dream in the publishing industry, but I hope the conversations on this show give you the ingredients you need to bake yours into reality. So let's flip the page and get into this chapter of Literary Blend. Hi friends, welcome back to Literary Blend. Today's chapter is called Writing Historical Mystery, and joining me on the show to cover this topic is Norman Woolworth. Hi Norman.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super excited to chat with you all about historical mystery. But before we get into that, I would love for you to share with the listeners how you got started in publishing and a little about your journey so far.
Okay. I'm a retired corporate executive, refugee from corporate America, if you will. And I guess during the early stages of COVID, I started playing around um, with some fiction. I have a writing background, but I always, aspired to write books, but I kind of imagined they would be nonfiction. But I started playing with a story, and that resulted in my first book. This is a series, which was called The Lafitte Affair. Um, and I found a publisher, and it was well received. So I knocked out number two, which is The Bolden Cylinder, which I believe we're here to talk about today.
Yeah.
And I'm well into number three, by the way.
Oh, amazing. Do you know how many you plan to have in the series, or are you just going to go until you run out of ideas?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think after this third one, I'm going to take at least a little bit of a hiatus and experiment with some other projects, but I'm pretty sure I'll come back to it.
Yeah. So, can you share a little about what the Bolden Cylinder is about?
Sure. So the Bolden in the title refers to Buddy Bolden, who is often referred to as the first jazz player. He's this very interesting historical figure who reigned in the New Orleans music scene around the turn of the 20th century for a fairly brief time. He was known as King Bolden back then. But then he kind of disappeared off the face of the earth because he was declared insane, and he spent the last 25 years of his life in a sanitarium. And all we know about Buddy really comes from his contemporaries interviewed 20 and 30 years after they had played with him or heard him. So it's very interesting because, and the other thing is, and the cylinder in the title refers to an Edison recording cylinder, which is what those early musicians recorded on. Which, as it sounds, they're cylinders that basically spun around the mandrel of a hand cranked phonograph machine. And there were long rumors that Buddy had cut a cylinder, but none has ever surfaced. So far as anyone knows, there are no recordings of Buddy Bolden yet, and certainly nobody alive has ever heard him play a note. Yet he is continuously credited as being this incredibly important sort of transitional figure.
That is so interesting. Whenever I saw the pitch for this, I was immediately hooked because, along with being an author, I'm a songwriter and recording artist. So I love music, and I love how woven in the music is with the New Orleans setting and everything like that. So, what is your background with music and New Orleans? Why did you want to set that there and draw from this historical mystery as a foundation for your book?
I mean, my background in music is simply that I'm a fan.
Love
My wife's a
it.
musician. I am not. um, but I've certainly, and I wouldn't even call myself a jazz aficionado, really. Sort of, I appreciate jazz. I listen to jazz, but I'm not I'm not somebody who's studied it a great deal or anything like that. My connection to New Orleans is that I went to school there. I went to Tulane, lived there for 5 years. And we get back, usually once a year or more. Have friends down there. My daughter went to school there, so I try to keep those. It occupies the city occupies a large chunk of real estate in my imaginative space. So it was a natural place to set these stories.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. So let's dig deeper into the craft side of things now. When you started exploring fiction, what drew you to historical mystery?
Well, I mean, I read a lot of history. Strangely, I don't actually read that many hit mysteries. I do read some. I'm more likely to be watching them on BritBox or something like that. But New Orleans has such a rich history, and I guess it started with I had this vision of my protagonist. His name is Bruno Abelard, and he's an antiques dealer, sort of an eccentric. Uh, somewhat cantankerous personality, a gourmand, um, and thinking about what kind of profession would bring people into the past and would stoke an interest in history. That seems sort of a natural. So he's an amateur sleuth, although he has a childhood friend, Beau Duplessis, who is a detective in the property crimes unit of NOPD, and they actually both narrate chapters. So you get their takes on each other, but you also Bo is able to take us into sort of the procedural aspects of Law and Order, whereas Bo kind of drives Brew rather kind of drives the historical research.
How long did it take you to do all the research for this? I have so much admiration for historical authors. I write young adult thriller, so I'm not doing all the historical research, and I have like so much respect for authors who do that because it feels like a lot. So, what was your process, and how long did it take before you felt confident to write the book?
Not that long, honestly, in both cases, in both books. So the first book involves the famous pirate Jean Lafitte, so a little further back in history. Um, in both cases, I read pretty widely, just from a foundational perspective before I got started. Maybe, a couple months worth of reading. And then as I got into the stories, as specific questions would arise, then I'd hunt down whatever source I needed, to answer those questions, um, including things about like, the atmospherics of the time. So like, what would a lady in New Orleans in 1820 be wearing to the opera? That kind of stuff. And it's amazing, as you know, I'm sure what you can find on the internet. There's also some great resources in New Orleans itself. When I visit there, I drop in on those. Um, but really, and the other thing is, I'm calling these historical mysteries, but the bulk of the stories take place in the present day New Orleans, and then we have these vignettes, or I call them historical interludes, which are chapters that take place at an earlier point in time, um, which are sort of interspersed with the present day narrative. But so it's not perhaps as research intensive as a full on historical novel might be.
You know, it's really interesting. And I think the dual timeline situation is super cool because you have the historical timeline that you're trying to stay true to from the research, but then in the contemporary timeline, you have your own characters who are investigating and you're weaving them together. And I think it's really cool when you can take something from history and have that in the story through those chapters, but then tie that together with the present timeline as the mystery is unfolding.
Yeah, and I've always enjoyed books that do that, whether they're mysteries or just regular literary fiction. I've always enjoyed that kind of going back and forth. So it's sort of a natural thing for me to gravitate to as a writer, I think.
Yeah, no, that's great. So, speaking of mysteries specifically, what are some challenges you had to overcome with that genre when it comes to keeping the mystery compelling and making all the clues, red herrings, and things like that clear to the reader and not too obvious? I feel like mystery is one of those genres that it takes some time to really nail it because you have all these moving pieces and you want it to be mysterious for the reader. And so, what are some things that you had to overcome as a writer as you were exploring this genre?
Well, it was definitely the hardest part for me. Plot generally. I mean, these, these were sort of character-driven stories from the outset, with a historical hook in mind. And I've never been able to sit down and just like do an outline kind of thing, which I know a lot of authors do. So there's a little bit of a fly by the seat of the pants aspect to the way that I have gone about writing these, which gets me into trouble because I'll be several chapters in and realize, oh, that's not going to work, or a new idea will occur to me, which I will drop in, but then I'll have to go back, to previous chapters to make sure everything, lines up to that. So it's probably not the most efficient way to go about this. But I also do keep I keep a running list of what I call parking lot issues. So, this or that clue comes up or red herring. They're sort of reminders that I need to go back and address that at some point. And so that's sort of the way I've dealt with that.
That's super interesting. I'm like the biggest plotter of all plotters. You should see my outlines. There's no, it's so funny though because I had a friend once who was telling me that one of her friends who wrote like thriller or mystery, she said she didn't know who the killer was until the end, and I'm like, girl, that can never be me. Like I know everything.
I am literally the same way. I'm not sure who. I'm writing the third one now. I'm probably three chapters from the end, and I'm still not entirely sure who the culprit is.
I feel like I need the outline to feel secure to start writing. I can't focus unless I have that safety net. But I think in a way it's really cool for pantsers because the drafting process is just such a thrill, I feel like, because if you don't know what you're getting into, you're constantly being surprised and you're experiencing all the reveals along with the characters. So I feel like there is a fun aspect to it. How would you describe your revision process then? I feel like that might take a bit of time.
Yeah, well, it's never ending actually. So, I'm constantly every time I write a new chapter, pretty much I go back through everything, and sometimes in a more detailed way than others, so that by the time I actually do get to the end, there's not as much revising as you might think because I've been doing it all along. But I didn't know anything about plotters and pantsers until until I started talking to other authors, and I am definitely a pantser. And what I have found is that the characters kind of tell me where to go. It's like I have a certain type of character. I put that character in a situation, and then it's like, okay, well, how what might come next? How is this character going to react? And then that'll lead to the next plot element, and it just kind of expands, like an accordion, until, and then of course, I have to make all the pieces connect. But it's really to a large extent, the plot is driven by the characters rather than the other way around.
No, I love that so much. I completely relate to that too. And I feel like it's fun when the characters control a little bit because even though I have an outline, whenever I'm drafting, there are definitely parts in the story where the characters kind of do something I wasn't really expecting, and then I kind of change my direction a little bit and then have to find a way to get back on track to the original outline so I don't have a whole mess for myself if I have a domino effect for the rest of the story. But I definitely have that experience too. And it's really funny in that aspect too, because I definitely know authors who are very determined in stating that authors are the ones that write the stories and the characters don't control the story, the author's in control. But I'm one of those people who definitely feels like the characters influence it in a way because once you have a protagonist and you have a story and you're writing that character, even though I outline, and I'm sure for you too, when you're pantsing it as well, you don't fully know the character and who they are as a person, their personalities, and things like that until they're actually on the page. So once you start writing them and discover who they are as a person, things can naturally shift based on that because your idea of who they were before you started writing may be a little different than who discover they're meant to be once you start writing them.
No, I completely agree with that. The characters sometimes surprise me. It's like, you know, 10 chapters ago, I'm not sure I would have seen this character do this, but or say this, but now he or she can.
Character development at its finest.
Yeah, yeah.
So you said you were working on the third one. Is this one set in New Orleans too?
It is
Oh,
same,
cool. Okay,
same
fun.
basic core set of characters, totally different, storyline. This one involves the Ursuline nuns who occupy a very prominent place in New Orleans history. They were there pretty much at the beginning and are still there. They operate the oldest uh, girls' private school in the country, Ursuline Academy, and the shrine of Our Lady of Prompt Succor, which is basically what the story revolves around. So yeah, I'm excited about it. I'd say it's a little more complex plot wise than the first two books. So it's as I get to the end here, well, I got a little more anxiety about pulling everything together than I remember having with the other two.
No, that's great. So you said that after this one, you're thinking about taking a little bit of a break from the series. Have you ever thought about if you did another series or standalone, do you have any historical time periods or other settings that you would feel interested in exploring in a book?
Yeah, I mean, but the thing, I don't know that I would even stay within the same genre. I mean, I'm thinking of experimenting a little more with, I don't know, just sort of literary fiction generally, which opens up, a huge number of possibilities, including historical fiction or a historical mystery or another series. I don't want to close myself off to anything. Um, but yeah, there are other settings for sure. I would feel pretty comfortable setting something in New England, for example. Um, possibly something, with an international component. I live in Charlottesville, Virginia, so certainly this area and Washington D.C. would be, places I could potentially set stories. New York City would be another. So, yeah, I'm open to it all.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love stories with international settings. My thriller is set in partially in Switzerland most of the time. It starts in San Diego and it ends in they go to Switzerland for this basically an escape room game. Does not go well, but the majority of the story takes place in Switzerland. I've never been out of the United States, so it took a lot of research to understand like what is it like in Switzerland? What's the culture like? The setting to describe it and stuff. But I think international settings are super
Yeah.
cool.
Although I will tell you, I mean, Google Earth is an amazing tool.
Yeah.
Even for me, as I'm jogging my memory about New Orleans, when I'm writing here in Virginia, I'm like, so I know that street, and I think it's one way, but which way does it go? So, I can look and see which way the cars are parked, It's
Oh, that's so
little things like
funny.
that. It's amazing.
Awesome. So, what is one of the biggest lessons you've learned as an author?
Um, I think well, there's probably several, but the one that stands out to me, I'm going to digress for just a second here. So I went to grad school. I have a master's in English literature, and during my time in grad school, we read a book by this German philosopher Wolfgang Iser called *The Implied Reader*. And this is a incredible oversimplification, but his basic theory is that the act of reading is an act of creation, just like the act of writing is. And you know, I very much have seen that in terms of the way different readers react to stories and characters, the way they pronounce things, the way they, sort of the vision they have in their mind of who somebody is, um, which is sort of cool, but it's also sort of this thing that when you put your book out there, you're sort of it's like releasing a child into the into the great unknown. Because you're not sure what's going to happen with it, how people are going to interact with the text, um, you know, and what they're going to take away from it. So that's just been very eye opening for me.
Yeah, no, I feel like that's definitely a part of it. I feel like with any kind of art, I feel the same way when I release music because I have the whole experience from writing the song and recording the song and doing the photo shoots and like getting everything ready. And then once I release it, it's like, it's kind of not mine anymore. Like, yeah, it's my song, but it belongs to other people now. And I feel like it's the same thing with stories. You have your own vision and things like that. And once it's out in the world, I think a really special part of art in general is that everybody comes at it from their own perspective. And you can have 100 people reading the same book, but because of who they are, their backgrounds, who they are as people, their personalities, they'll pick up on different things and interpret things in different ways. And I think that's just the beauty of art. And I think it's really great how we're able to give works of art to others and then allow them to experience it in a very personal way.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with
Amazing. So, just to wrap up our chat, what advice do you have to anyone listening who's interested in writing historical mysteries?
that. um, be prepared for some agony, but also, just sort of the joy of the ride, if you will. There are times, I mean, I think any writer, regardless of genre, would know that there are times when it feels pretty lonely. It's just you and your characters and your story. In my case, I have a group of about a dozen readers who I send chapters off to. I write them, and that's very helpful for me because it makes me feel like, and they give me feedback, but it makes me feel like I'm part of a community. This is almost a group creation, so it feels, I feel a little less isolated, but it can be a very isolating experience. That's something you sort of have to ask yourself. Are you prepared to spend that much time alone with you and your thoughts and your characters? Um, and then the other thing is just to, like, you probably start with some sort of preconceived notion of where you're going with it. And I would just say, be open to the story taking you somewhere you're not expecting.
Amazing advice to end on. Thank you so much for joining me for this chat. It's been so fun. And this brings us to the plot twist of the show, which is when I get to ask you a random question you couldn't have seen coming. Are you ready?
Oh boy, here we go.
If you had to solve a mystery with any historical figure, who would you want to solve the mystery with?
Oh my goodness. Now, does this have to be by a mystery? Are you talking like a crime, or it can be some other kind of mystery?
Anything. Just like who would you want your partner to be, your historical figure partner, to come back to life and help you solve a mystery?
Let's go with Sigmund Freud,
Oh, so good, so good.
right?
He would just solve
Because
everything right away.
he'll take somebody, he'll go into somebody's dreams and their
Yeah.
unconscious and pull it out of there. So
Oh, so good. Perfect answer. Oh my goodness. I love that so much. Amazing. Well, can you please share with everybody where they can connect with you online and check out your books?
certainly. So the easiest thing to do is to go to my website, which is www.normanwoolworth.com. There's links to ordering there, or you can just Google the Bolden Cylinder or the Lafitte Affair, or my name, or just go on Amazon or Goodreads or whatever your Barnes and Noble, your platform of choice, or for that matter, go into your local bookstore, and if they don't have the book stocked, they can order it for you.
Perfect. Thank you so much again for joining me. I loved having you on the show.
Thanks so much, to me. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, absolutely. And listeners, that's a wrap on this chapter with Norman, all about writing historical mystery. If you enjoyed our conversation, please consider leaving Literary Blend a review and giving it 5 stars to help others just like you discover it. Also, if you have friends in publishing you think would enjoy the show too, please pass it along to them. Thanks for listening, and until we flip to the next chapter, happy reading and writing.